Welcome in, as promised. Here is your Missouri preview edition of Musings from the Mountains. I'm Keenan Cummings, managing editor for WVSports.com.
And I'm Patrick Kotnik, staff writer for WVSports.com.
We're back again. We're back outside. We've got our game notes ready, and we're ready to talk about the Chase Barrett Homecoming Edition, or as you'd call the Missouri football preview. The only player from Missouri on the West Virginia roster. That'll change next year with a commitment in Linnell Carr, but only player. So it's the Chase Barrett Homecoming issue. We're going to talk about the Tigers. Surprising, to say the least. Surprising opening game against Wyoming. They pretty much offensively did what you thought they would do. That is, speaking of Missouri, they just were playing from behind for most of the game. It was catch up. Kelly Bryant had a up and down debut, more good than bad, but the bad really sticks out. He had a fumble that ended up costing him a touchdown. He also had an interception in the end zone. But the guy threw for 423 yards, had 31 completions, moved the ball. Now, he was playing from behind a lot, which took them kind of out of their element. Didn't run the ball as much as you'd expect, but flashed his ability to get to the edge and throw the football, which is part of the problem West Virginia's going to face with this Missouri offense. Surprising, though, Pat. I mean, did you see that one coming at all?
Well, I mean, like you said, I didn't see them losing to Wyoming at all, but I would say the one constant there was Kelly Bryant, as you just mentioned. We know what he could do. Now, I feel like he definitely showed, I think he impressed more as a passer, definitely. He didn't have, for a dual-threat guy like him, I really feel like he didn't impress as much in the run game. But yet again, that's because they were mostly playing from behind. And something I said to you earlier before we started recording was that this matchup between Missouri and West Virginia, it's interesting in the dynamic that really don't have a baseline, a fair assessment of what to make out of certain position groups for Missouri. Because, Wyoming only attempted 16 passes against Missouri's defense.
Only completed 6!
Only completed 6, and still came up with a 6-point win. And then you can also say the same for Missouri's run game. Now you said they're supposed to have a pretty strong run game if they get it going. Kind of like West Virginia, once they get it going, it could be
2 good backs.
Yeah, it could be very dangerous. Like I said, they're playing from behind mostly in the second half, and one of their top backs barely even played in the second half because, like I said, they're playing from behind. They're forced to do a lot of passing situations. So, like I said, in those situations, it's an interesting matchup in the sense that we really don't know a whole lot about what they're capable of in the secondary and stuff. Now, I know their running game, was pretty ineffective there in the first half, but it's going to be interesting to see how they respond, especially this is the first home game for Missouri, the beginning of a 5-game homestand.
How does that even happen?
Unheard of.
Yeah.
Unheard of.
He mentioned Larry Roundtree, who's one of the better backs in the SEC, an all SEC caliber back, really wasn't even a factor in the second half. It was pretty much a Tyler Beatty show as they were throwing the football. They split their backs up. It's not that Roundtree cannot catch the football. It's just Beatty's he's used more effectively there. He's a return guy. Think of him as their Alex Sinkfield in a sense, just a more expanded role. The other guy's more between the tackles and can do what he can do. Missouri's got some good receivers to go along with Kelly Bryant. I think they're going to be able to test West Virginia a lot more than James Madison. Only one 29-yard completion. That was the only splash play James Madison had in the passing game, and that was on a double move. And on that double move, Hakeem Bailey actually played the route pretty well. Mm-hmm. He played it too well. It allowed the guy to kind of curve underneath and catch the football. Other than that, West Virginia's corners, their secondary held up well. They're going to be tested. And not only
Definitely.
Ben DiNucci could get West Virginia on the edge and make some plays with his feet. Kelly Bryant's going to be able to do that and also throw the football. I think that's going to be one of the keys to this game.
And that's one thing that Vic Koenig even made a point saying in this week's weekly presser is that they were not expecting Ben DiNucci to run the ball as well as he did. Really caught him off guard, but you got to hand it to Koenig and the defense for making those second half adjustments. James Madison had more rushing yards in the first half than West Virginia had total yards in the first half, and then they shut him down. I'm not sure the exact total. In the second half they had in terms of rushing yards for James Madison, but great adjustments for them. But you got to think that if Ben DiNucci was able to have that much success to start out, makes you wonder how they're going to if they incorporate Kelly Bryant into that mix. Like I said, I know he wasn't much of a factor in the run game, but you never know with his dual threat ability.
He clearly can do it though. I think that's the concern. He has a history of being able to do it before. During his time at Clemson, he can throw the football too. He kind of put on a show.
He did.
And 431 yards is career high. He kind of flashed, some of the reasons why he wanted this opportunity. Missouri's had an excellent offense over the last couple of years. He comes in, they don't miss a beat. Of course, they lose the game, but he played well for the most part. That one interception is going to stand out just because they ultimately lost the game by 6 points. But
It reminds me a lot of that 2016 West Virginia-Oklahoma State game there in Stillwater, where Skylar Howard 3 turnovers, but those were the decisive ones. Those were that equaled out to 17 points for Oklahoma State. Almost kind of like the same situation here for Missouri against Wyoming. Is that Kelly Bryant played a hell of a game, really did, career high in passing yards like we just mentioned. But like you said, those turnovers cost them the game. And one of the deciding factors, I know you can't narrow it down to just one play, but definitely some back-breaking turnovers, 2 of which occurred in the red zone.
Yeah, and you're going to look, too, something that everyone's going to point out immediately, and it's not necessarily fair, is Missouri got gashed on the ground. I mean gashed. 293 yards, I believe. 261 of Wyoming's yards were after contact. Now, you look at that on paper, 7.3 yards a pop. Hey, West Virginia only rushed for 34 yards. That means they're going to have a big day on the ground, right?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Wyoming did some things to Missouri that West Virginia, I'm not going to say they're not capable of doing, but they're not going to be as efficient.
They game plan really well.
Yes, they used their quarterback in the run game. He was a big part of it. Had a 75-yard run in the game. Used their tight ends, tried to mix and match, to get some creases and create some numbers in the run game. That's not necessarily West Virginia's game. They have some tight ends. Most of them are young. They don't have 2 or 3. They're not going to be able to mix and match like that. And their quarterback's definitely not a threat to run like Wyoming's was. So while I do think that is going to be interesting, it's going to be one of those, which one's going to give? Is Missouri's run defense really that bad, or were they just out-schemed? Or is West Virginia's offense really that bad at rushing the football, and Missouri bounces back? I think that's going to be a telling part of this game. The Mountaineers have to run the football.
And I think it's important, too, to point out that 2 rushes, out of those, it was nearly a 300-yard day for Wyoming against Missouri's defense. That they got 136 of those yards just on 2 rushes alone. I believe one was like a 75-yard rush. I think the other one was somewhere there in the 60s. Like I said, this is going to be a pretty interesting matchup. I think the game could come down to that, is whether or not West Virginia is able to develop their run game against Missouri. Like I said, for the offensive line, for West Virginia's offensive line, co-offensive coordinator and offensive line coach Matt Moore did say that they were pretty assignment sound against James Madison. The only problem was that it was just a cluster of bodies. They couldn't get a lot of movement, and that's something that Colt McKivitz also said that I pointed out, is that was their inability to get vertical movement.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you're targeted right if you're not getting a push. It comes down to that. Playing offensive line, there's 2 things you got to do. You got to get targeted up, you got to move. And the second part did not happen for West Virginia. And we'll touch on that. You asked some questions. We'll get into that a little bit later. I think West Virginia's gonna have to throw the football too. I mean, obviously we've already talked about establishing a run game. There's opportunity for that. They're gonna have to be a little bit more efficient. The run game becomes important because when they do throw the football, Missouri's got some guys that can get after it. They didn't play very well against Wyoming. I think this is going to be a different Missouri team. I agree with Neil Brown 100%. I think that coming into their environment, this is a team that had a lot of high expectations.
Now they got a chip on their shoulder.
Yeah, some people picked them to contend in the East, up there with Georgia. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how this team bounces back. And then, what do you find out about West Virginia? We found out some things from the opener, but it was an FCS opponent. It was sloppy. They got the win. That's all that matters. But we're going to find out a lot more about the Mountaineers here in a couple days. And I think it's going to be telling, maybe for the course of the season. But as we did last week, we'll get to our predictions. I know you're waiting with bated breath. You cannot wait to hear who we're picking. We were right last week, by the way. Not with a score, but we were right.
Hey, I did get the 7-point difference, though.
Well, we were pretty right with how the game was going to turn out. We did say it would be sloppy. But we're going to get to your questions. You asked questions again on the blue lot. So we're going to entertain them now. We have not rehearsed these. These are going to be rapid-fire type questions.
You ready?
Let's go.
All right, let's go for it. Question number 1. Was Missouri flat for this game, or is this just another example of the SEC being overrated?
I don't think the SEC is overrated. I think that's a popular thing to do when they have a couple trip-ups. But I think that Missouri just was not prepared for what Wyoming did. I mean, Wyoming is a good football team. I don't think they're maybe top 25, who knows? But they're a better football team than people give them credit for. And they were able to get some things on Missouri scheme-wise that they really didn't have an answer for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you there. Like I said, first games always bring unknowns, and you could definitely tell Missouri was caught off guard with a lot of that 12. I believe it was 21 personnel.
Yeah, tight end mix.
Got multiple tight ends in there where they were able to create gaps and ultimately threw them off guard. Next question here was the Missouri issue being out-schemed, tricked or just outplayed and not as good as people expected? I know we kind of already touched on this.
All the above. All the above. That's what I'm going with. I think that it was a combination of all of it. I think that they had a really good game plan. They were able to get them off balance. I think honestly, Wyoming wanted it more. That elevation plays a factor, but I think it was a game where Missouri jumped out. You thought Missouri was going to roll them early.
They jumped out to a 14-0
you
lead.
thought Missouri was going to roll them early. I think they relaxed a little bit. Wyoming settled in and punched them in the mouth. And by the time Missouri woke up, there wasn't very much time left. They had a chance to win the game at the end. They just weren't able to convert on fourth down.
Now, we've already touched on this a little bit. What do you think WVU will do schematically to improve the run game against Missouri?
Well, I think it goes back to what we were saying a little bit. You've got to be more physical. You've got to be able to move people. I think that Neal admitted it. He thought that West Virginia could win one-on-one situations more than they did, and that is alarming against an FCS school. That's taking nothing away from James Madison. I think they have some guys on that line that are going to play in the NFL, but it's only going to get harder. West Virginia, they're going to play much tougher opponents up front, much bigger guys that are more physical. They got to win those battles, and I think it's going to come with some dressing up. They're going to move some guys. They're going to try to create some extra gaps in the run game, maybe try some outside runs. They're going to mix it up. It's not necessarily going to be hand the ball off and go up the middle because nobody likes Leroy right up the middle. So.
And you pointed out, I'm curious. Well, something I want to point out too is that Neal Brown did mention how this team did handle adversity pretty well there, especially faced up against what they being down 7-3 there after the first half, and it makes you wonder with the run game if they are going to throw some tricks in there. Maybe have Tevin Bush, on a couple of those
some of that motion,
some of those jet sweeps, or even have maybe Austin Kendall, do a little more.
He's got to keep the ball in some situations too, because it looked like he had a lane and just decided to hand the ball off anyways.
Next question here. This regards West Virginia secondary. I know Josh Norwood was moved to safety, but is the plan for him to play down in the box this year?
See, that's an interesting question. At some point, if you got to play guy safety, you got to man up. But this isn't anything unique. Look around the Big 12. A lot of safeties are cornerback types playing safety. You almost have to, in a sense, with the way a lot of teams pass. Now, when you go against those teams that are going to use 12, 21 personnel and box you up with tight ends and make things more difficult, that presents a challenge. I'll be interested to see if they don't have different packages. Whenever they start going against teams that are going to try to big boy him a little bit, but for now, you got to depend on your guys to make tackles. If he has to come down and make a tackle in the run game, he's shown he can do it at corner. So yeah, it's scary, but it's nothing that a lot of teams aren't going through.
And tackling was kind of an issue for West Virginia there, especially in the first half. So interested to see how they come out and how they respond there. How they come out, whether or not they come out swinging there in the first half, or are they going to keep making the same mistakes?
Yeah, and watching it on tape or watching the game live, I felt like they missed more tackles. They were only charted with 4. That was surprising to me.
Next question here: do you think Neal Brown was holding back on the playbook and not showing his hand against JMU?
Yes.
If so, why? Or is it the fact that he could continue to install certain plays to West Virginia's strength?
Part of your question, yes. I think that
he's made a point saying that.
You're going to develop it as you go. Another, you never show your hands. If you show everything in week 1, what's the point? West Virginia's playing an FCS opponent, a good one at that, but you got to be able to win this football game. And they were trying to man up. It didn't turn out the way they thought it would. But you've got a lot left in the tank here, and I think you're going to continue to see that develop as West Virginia moves forward. Maybe even this weekend.
West Virginia has a young team with a new coach and scheme. After watching the JMU game, has your season predictions changed any? And if
has
so,
yours? I learned nothing from that game other than the fact that West Virginia could gut it out and beat an FCS team. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm just saying you expected West Virginia. I expected West Virginia, at least, to win a sloppy football game. They won a sloppy football game. That doesn't move the needle one way or the other to me. I think this weekend is when you're really going to find out some things. I'm not saying Missouri is a great opponent, but they're really good compared to what West Virginia's went against, and they're on the road. If West Virginia's able to go in and what I would consider an upset, regardless of the line, if they can go in and upset Missouri, I think you move that line a little bit. Right now I'm keeping it at 5.5. I'm still not sure if I'm over or under. But I got to make a call here soon because you guys are going to make it for me.
And no team, something I pointed out before is no team is the same. From the season, from week 1 to week 11, week 12. So now I think for West Virginia, Neal Brown has especially said that his expectations are a little higher, especially after last week. Like I said, there's a lot of unknowns in week 1. Some guys have some nerves. It's going to be very interesting to see just how some of those guys play. He pointed out Mike Brown, where he knew the game plan, but once they started, when JMU started showing different looks, that at first he didn't adjust too well. So seeing guys like him, he also pointed out someone like Sam James. Seeing how those guys come out and play this Saturday will definitely be something to watch. Now, next question here. Most of us knew coming into this game it was a rebuilding year, and West Virginia's strength was at the running back position. Letty Brown was out with an ankle injury, but after watching the way the O-line played in the run blocking, do you see any changes or shifts from players moving back to current positions?
No, I think they keep it the way it is. I think that they held up their end of the bargain and pass. You got to run the football, and a lot of that comes back to what we've already talked about. You've got to be able to move people. I mean, you have to.
Physicality standpoint.
The old offensive lineman right here. Listen to him. You got to be able to move people.
Next question here. Would like to know any thoughts or interviews you may have from the coaches with any specific comments after what they have watched on the game film.
I think it literally goes back to what we just talked about. That was the number one takeaway for me. How disappointed they were in the sense that they thought they were going to be able to line up and win one-on-one matchups against James Madison. They weren't. They were let down by blocking as a whole. Not just, we talk about the offensive line.
Well, I mean, pass blocking was pretty impressive. Aside from a couple of missed assignments, I mean, Matt Moore said, pass blocking was pretty decent. Was pretty solid throughout the whole game against JMU. But run game completely different.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that starts not just with the offensive line. I mean, the wide receivers were miserable.
Yeah,
I mean, that
blocking.
Yeah, they weren't good. Other than Sean Ryan, he probably was the only one that did his job there. That has to get better. If West Virginia, look at the play that Tevin Bush had. That play doesn't happen without downfield blocking. That's the difference. Mm-hmm. And that was probably one of the only plays where he got some really good downfield blocking.
Like I said, we mentioned physicality not just on the offensive line, but just across the board. We're talking D-line, secondary, wide receivers, running back. I mean, physicality is a huge emphasis for West Virginia this week. Next question here. According to Pro Football Focus, Missouri's secondary scored poorly, and I looked it up. If you looked at my pre-snap read, which published today,
you should.
And if you didn't and you can't view it, I highly recommend you subscribe to WVSports.com so you're able to view it. Complete in-depth breakdown of position to position, who might have the advantage and why. But Missouri did score coverage-wise 63.3 against Wyoming. Several missed tackles and long runs given up by Missouri's entire defense. Does Kendall settle down in his first away start and move the ball against Missouri?
Well, I don't think he necessarily didn't move the ball against James Madison. I think he was a little amped up at the start.
He definitely settled down.
Yeah, he missed some throws. I think he was a different quarterback in the second half. And I think now that you got that first game jitters, the first game was at home, sometimes that's more difficult than being on the road. And I know he has experience. He's a graduate transfer. He's played in some big games, but not a lot. He's been in some big games, seen guys. Now he's done it for himself. That first one's out the way. I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think he's, of course, going to miss some passes at times. That happens whether you're Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Will Greer, whoever's playing quarterback.
I think there'll be a little nerves there considering it's the first. It's going to be a pretty big environment for Missouri there in Columbia.
All right, and now the minute you've all been waiting for. With bated breath, you're ready for it. I know you are. It's our predictions. I'm going to let Patrick go first. I'm going to be a gentleman here. I have my pick. We have not discussed this. Patrick, what is your pick?
Thank you, Sir Keenan. I'm going to take Missouri in this game by a score of 35-27. I really believe that Missouri has their backs against the wall, and they're going to come out firing. For West Virginia, you can't afford to start off this game slow, but I really feel like for Missouri, they want to see some of those unknowns play out, such as their secondary being more tested. I'm interested to see where how they incorporate their run game and how the distribution is between pass plays and run plays. But for me, this game's going to come down to whether or not who can establish a solid run game. And West Virginia, like I said, it comes from more of a physicality standpoint. But I really believe that if West Virginia can get the run game going, then they have a chance. I feel like they're going to lead in this game, but Missouri's going to do just enough at the end to seal the win.
Unfortunately, I agree with Patrick. I have a very similar score as well, 35-28. I think West Virginia is going to play well for periods in this game. I agree with you. I think they will have a lead at times. I think this is a Missouri team with their back against the wall that was projected to do quite a bit of things. I think Kelly Bryant is the difference in the game. I think what he's able to do as a runner and a passer is gonna make the difference for West Virginia. I do think that West Virginia does show signs of life in the run game. I do think they will run the ball a little bit better. I don't think it's going to be 7 yards a pop, but I think they're going to run the ball better. I think that Austin Kendall's going to continue to progress. I just think on the road at Missouri,
well, and that's
tough.
I feel like there's going to be some growing pains, especially with it being the teams with a primarily young and they have some experience now. But I feel like they are going to have some growing pains there in their first road game.
Yeah, last time this series is 3-3 overall. West Virginia won the last meeting 26-11 in Morgantown in 2016. That was Skylar Howard's breakout party.
My freshman year.
Yeah, the game's going to be on ESPN2 at noon. Tune in. We will have our game thread going and coverage all day over at WVSports.com. I recommend you come try it out if you haven't already. If you're watching this video and you haven't, hit that subscribe. And this has been another fun-filled edition of Musings from the Mountains. We'll see you Saturday after we have a football game to talk about.